The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week, we will speculate further on the next sporting director and head coach. We will talk briefly about the St. Louis City match and kind of why it matters in the context of where we are in the team right now. And we will discuss the options and flexibility that the next sporting director might have this summer and kind of what changes we think they can make, what changes we would like to see them make. My name's Landon and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jeremiah Bentley. I just want to acknowledge a little bit today that I'm dragging a bit because I had 7 high school football players, 5 of which were offensive linemen, staying at my house last night for Jackson's birthday. The good thing is they're good kids. They stay up till 2:30 in the morning playing video games and board games. They did not shoot any street lights, steal any street signs, or raid my liquor cabinet. This is probably a thing that I did all 3 of at their age. So, they're good, but man, that was a lot.
I can imagine. You told me this was going down. Ashley, one of her best friends, had a baby last week. Ashley was in the room for the birth, and then has been going over and kind of helping them. They don't have family in town, so she's been kind of helping take care of the baby and giving them rest during this first week of having the baby at home. And I'm talking to you about what you're going through and talking to her about what she's going through. I'm just like, I stayed up a little too late, so I'm a little tired today. Maybe I'll just play some video games on this Monday to kind of relax before recording the show.
Yeah. Well, good for you. So you get to carry this show then, and I think we also have to acknowledge something that we talked about last week that wasn't going to happen, which ties in a little bit of this story because yesterday we talked to Ryan Madden from Austin FC, who was also keeping up with 3 boys, I think under the age of 6 or something, and he was also very tired, and his house was very chaotic, and we had talked about having Andy Lockdane all this week, and all kind of collectively decided with everything that's going on in the world, this week is not the best week for that, and so we should probably push that back. So Andy will come on at some point, but it's not going to be on the show tonight.
Yeah, and for further context, I imagine anybody who listened through the end of the show was probably excited to hear Andy on the show, but given of the state of where things are, I think it will be a better interview 2 weeks from now. So you'll have to wait a little bit longer to hear it, but I think you'll appreciate it once we get there. So we can leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and we always want to do stuff that people appreciate and enjoy and adds value to it, despite what's going on. So and it's one of those things. So when we pivoted from that, I'm like, man, I don't know if we have anything to talk about. And I went through and read these notes, and this is still going to be a very full show this week, but it's largely a very full show full of speculation about what might happen, what might not be able to happen, what we want to happen. But I think it'll be a fun one, and it'll be a fun one for people to be able to comment about online, and share their thoughts. And I look forward to the ongoing conversation with everybody else in Austin FC land after we do this show.
All right, let's dig into this first segment here, Jeremiah. Where should we start?
Well, I think for the Austin FC news of the week, one thing we have to go back to is last week. I was just thinking about this today, is last Monday was such a whirlwind because we get this news Monday morning. We're trying to talk to Adrian. I'm sure with you get 50 texts from different people also trying to be gainfully employed at the same time. And it was just such a nonstop rush to get to 8 o'clock on Monday night last week to get this show started. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
So I feel the good thing about this opening segment on this show, which we'll get into a little bit about the search, is we have a little bit of time to think about who's out there. There are more people out there who might be involved, might be realistic options. And it's not just quick, find the first 5 names of anybody you might be able to think of who might be available and a decent coach. I'm looking forward to this, but I think we have to start with what came last week, which was after Nico Estevez was let go. He did, I think it was 3 screen long Instagram posts, thanking the fans for how great they were, showing he appreciated his time in Austin. And it's something I feel you don't see a ton from a coach who's fired a year and a half into the gig, but it just it really speaks to what kind of person he is.
Yeah, it was more than the requisite, right? You'll see a little comment or a little post or something, but this was a long and thoughtful message to fans, to the club, to Roto, to anybody he was interacting with. And it takes me back to the things that we were saying as he was hired, as I got a chance to interview him and fans got a chance to meet him as they were kind of putting him out in front of people. And a thing that I said a few times in that era was, I am fairly confident that Nico Estevez is a good person. I'm not sure if he's a good soccer coach or not, but I'm pretty sure he's a good person. And I think, like, after everything that's happened, I feel like my feelings are quite concrete on both of these things at this point. But the good person part has not changed. I still 100% believe that. And I'm glad that he did this, and I'm glad you brought it up on this show so we get a chance to kind of say this, because I was a little bit I felt bad we didn't say more about that last week as we were talking about it, but the whole whirlwind of it all, we were just trying to get through it. But now I'm glad we have some space to say, like, Nico's a good dude. Wish the best for all, like, him and his family. Hope he is successful in his future, because the guy deserves it just for who he is.
So we do actually wish him best in his future endeavors, which is almost never true when you see it about somebody. The other thing we got, I think this is a quote from Brad Stuver that got some attention from national media and others, is like the players didn't find out before, and I think they found out like from social media, just like everybody else. I don't know how this goes typically during an in-season firing. I would think that is pretty common because you don't want people leaking it out, because I'm sure there are people who are friendly to the coach who, you don't want to put them in a weird spot with the coach. You don't want to put the front office in the weird spot with the coach you're talking about them. So there was some outrage. Do you think there's any reason that's justified?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it sucks. Like, I agree with that part 100%. Like, it sucks that that's the way that it has to happen. But I think for some of the reasons you just mentioned, it's kind of the way it has to happen, where as soon as you do it one thing or the other, it's getting out. And so once you tell the person who's getting fired, or you tell the league or whoever, the news will get out that way. If you want to tell the players before then, it's going to get out that way too. And you can't tell the players before you tell the coach or the sporting director, whoever's getting fired. So I think because it was a day off and the players weren't in the facility, it probably made it even harder, where if they were in the training center that day, you could probably say, like, okay, we just had this conversation. We're going to walk right into this other room and talk to the players. But they couldn't do it that way that day. I don't think this is anything to be upset at the club about necessarily. Like, I think it's just kind of the way it shook out, and there's lots of stuff to be upset about. Let's not go looking for other ones.
Yeah, and they did do it the next day, right? I think that's what Brad also said, is that they had a team meeting and then they talked individually with players the next day, which is probably the first day. It'd be the day that they're back in training, and it's the first day they could reasonably and normally do it. So I thought their reaction was weird, which is the only reason I bring it up.
Yeah, I think if they had, like, I mean, there's reports of Pochettino letting the U.S. players who didn't make the team know by email. I think that sucks. Like, yeah, that is like a bad way to do the thing. But the fact that they did come in the next day in person, had conversations with the players, like, I think they did what they needed to do there.
Well, let's go on now to the sporting director and coach search, and who available options might be. And some of these ones, because I look back at the notes from last week, some of these are going to be guys that we talked about last week, but I feel like we know a little bit more context about it. Do you want to take these parts separately, or do you want to kind of follow the format of the Verde All Day article? I think that probably everybody read, or a lot of us read, and sort of go through the combinations of the choices.
We probably don't need to go through like every little thing, but there was some good context there. So yeah, start wherever you think is interesting.
Okay, let's go with sporting director, which is Tim Bezbachenko, Corey Ray, and or Jamie McMillan was the first one. All folks that have connections to Wilfred Nancy, which is why these become interesting. And also there's this like Ilie Sanchez, I think it was an Instagram post that was on very briefly, where he was on a call with Nancy and McMillan, which everybody thought was like a mystery, but also turns out it was part of like a league scheduled seminar. But still, there's some available real connection there.
Yeah, the Bezbachenko has already been hired, and I believe they added an asterisk
That's
to that
right.
one where
That's right.
that kind of happened in between when they posted it and when that hiring happened. So Corey Ray, I believe, is at St. Louis right now. And then Jamie McMillan did work for the Crew, I believe worked in Toronto as well. She is married to Corey Ray. And so I'm not sure what that would look like. It's like they're
Yeah.
sporting directors competing against one another in the same conference for the same players, and they happen to be married to each other. I don't know what the laws or rules are about that kind of thing. I think it would be cool to hire a woman sporting director for a lot of reasons. Like, I think that would be really, really cool and interesting. I don't want to hire a woman for the sake of hiring a woman necessarily, if that makes sense. And of those three names, she is the one who is like she's been like a number 2 or number 3 more often than like the 2 or the 1, like these other guys have been. So it would be interesting, but like, I don't know enough about like what were her responsibilities at these teams. And then also, like, would the league allow her to be competing against her husband in the same conference?
That would make for some interesting dinner table discussions for sure. It would be the oh, man, I can't remember now. Oh, I guess the more modern version of it is like, who was the woman that was like the Kellyanne Conway and George Conway at dinner, sitting on both sides of the opposite sides of the political spectrum? I'm sure that went really well for them. They're divorced now. Then the next one on the list, which we did talk about last week, and I think everybody in the world, if you're hiring a sporting director, this is your first choice, which is Garth Lagerwey. The questions become, is he ready for it? And is this a place that he wants to come back to, even if he is ready for it?
Yeah, I don't have anything else to say about that one. I mean, make the call, ask him, hey, you interested? No? Okay, we did our best.
Yeah. I thought another interesting one here was Chance Myers, who's the Nashville SC2. We talked about sort of the up and coming number 2s, and whether he would want to be here. So that's a name I'm down for sure. Knowing nothing about him other than like they're good, and he's
the one
2.
who is like younger than me, I think. Which
is he the one? I couldn't remember who the guy on the list was. Yeah. Oscar Pereja, we talked about maybe wanting to be in both roles, but we kind of covered that last week. And do you have anybody else?
This was another thing. We didn't mention this on last week's show, but Muzi, who was a sporting director in Orlando at one point, who worked with Pareja, is available right now. And so if that would be another like synergistic hire we could do and bring both of them in. So again, I think that would be one where I wouldn't be mad about it, but I also probably wouldn't be like super excited about it. Just because it's like the MLS retread kind of thing where like, yeah, they did fine. They had some good moments, some good years, but it's not the guys we're like kind of clamoring for, right?
Right. And so do you think, is that what our expectation should be? To me, it feels like this is the move where we're going to go to guys who are in MLS and had some success because they took the out-of-the-box option with Burrell, and it did not work out. And it seems like this team's going to make safer choices while maybe aiming higher than you would think about before. Like these names that we talked about are people who've had like real success in MLS under their own, and maybe not like a promising coach like Josh Wolf or like a guy who succeeded with piles of money like Claudio Reyna. But like, do you think that's where we should set our bar for the sporting director and coach, is sort of like people who have had success but have also gotten fired from their last job?
Yeah, the way I look at it is there's some options available right now, technically available, like people who aren't in jobs, who I would be very excited about. Call those people, try to get those people, and that's your Garth Lagerwey on the sporting director side, Jim Curtin and Wilfred Nancy on the coaching side. Call them, do whatever you can to get them on the phone, get a conversation going. Maybe they're not interested. Maybe they're not even interested in taking any job, much less this job. That's fine. But do your best to do that. Make your pitch. Try to sell them on this project. If those guys, but like if none of those guys are options, my enthusiasm for this drops significantly. Where, okay, we didn't get these people who are kind of proven entities, so we're going to move on to these I feel it's disrespectful to call them MLS retreads, but like people who have had mixed success in MLS and moving on to those just because they're what's available, or the alternative being bringing someone in from outside when we've seen here in Austin and in other places where there is a learning curve to this league and it's going to take a while for someone to get settled in. It would make me nervous to bring someone from outside the league to try to turn this team around in a season. But that's where I'm standing. And so like, again, and that's where like Oscar Pareja or like some of these other people fall. It's like, yeah, it's fine. Like they'll probably do a fine job, but I'm not confident they're going to do a great job.
So other than the people now let's talk about the coaches. So like other than Nancy, Curtin, Pareja, what other coaching options do you want to discuss?
So I was looking at the coaches who have been fired this year. So Pareja's one of them. Donadell, who is in Montreal, don't really know anything about him, and he got fired in his first season. So I think we can probably scratch that one off the list. Javier Mascherano, I think that one's probably not an option, and not sure that either side would really want that one. Rudstrom, who got fired from the Crew, that kind of failed pretty fantastically. So I think we should pump brakes on that one. And then Phil Neville, who I don't know that any fan base is going to be shouting for that one.
Can you imagine that one? Yeah.
One who is still technically available is Eric Ramsey, who coached the Minnesota team last season, who was so good. He by all accounts, very good coach. Like he's young, talented. I think I'm not sure like what locker room looked like, but they were at least playing well for him, if not actually liked him. But he played what some folks might describe as terrorist ball. Would you be okay with that if he came in and said like, we're bunkering counter, we're launching long balls, playing a low block defense, but we're gonna win? Would you buy into that, or would you be against that kind of move?
If we can do that and I can win, then I'm fine. Like, you know, victory is the ultimate like entertainment. But I think we've seen a team over the last couple of years that like doesn't score goals and doesn't win, and that is the most boring style of soccer. So like that's the fear with this roster, because you got to deal with the players that you have, is that you may want to play that way, but like, do you have the ability to play that way? And so, yeah, I don't know about that one. And the other name I had was Vanni Sartini, just because he's endlessly entertaining. I don't know, like if he's a good choice or not, but he's the opposite of that. He would be a fun choice, no matter whether this team was like actually winning or not.
I think he would be like a fun culture hire for like, I think the criticism that was reported out was like, okay, he's not necessarily like a bad tactical mind, but he's not one of these coaches, like these pretty rare coaches where, okay, this coach is making this group of players better than the sum of their parts because of like plugging, like the way he's fitting them together, the tactics he's putting onto the field with this group of players. That was never the way people talked about him. It was more like people love this guy and they like playing for him, and he's like a good cultural presence. That could be interesting in this group, honestly. We'll get into this a little bit later. Like, I don't know that the culture is necessarily entirely broken with this team, but I think it could probably be better. But maybe winning and like having a plan and being the players being confident in that plan working and helping them play better would probably be the biggest boost to culture, and not necessarily just like having a guy around that they liked, because we already had that. Like, I think the players like Nico. I think they kind of had the same opinion as us. Like, he's a very nice man. I like being around him.
Yeah, and remember at one point, because Austin was winning, Josh Wolf won that like player survey, the player they most wanted to play for, till they stopped winning, and then that culture was chaotic, right? So like, you can't...
His name was not mentioned in the next year's survey.
Right. Anybody else you want to talk about before we move on?
So before the game on Saturday, I was saying, we went out to the watch party, Austin Beer Works, and I was telling people at our table, like, I'm ready for Austin to win this game. And people start saying, like, we should hire Davey Arnaud. He's never lost for this team. That didn't happen, and so we don't have to have that discussion. But do you think Davey is like a viable hire for this? I think the way that he speaks, like we'll talk about his press conference a little bit later too, but he sounds like a coach, right? Like when you think of how a coach talks and kind of the way you navigate a press conference, way you are around players, he's just like a coach to me. Like that's the way I think of Davey Arnaud. Is that enough? Like, do you think would you even consider hiring him right now?
I mean, that's true, but and maybe I'm just burned from hiring Wolf without like real head coaching experience, but I feel like given the other list of available names, and something we haven't talked about a lot though, is that like I think Austin is a really appealing job because the ownership group has shown interest in spending, even when we thought they wouldn't spend any more on players. And because of the stadium and because of the fans and because like in the context of MLS, Austin seems like a desirable market. So I feel like you could do better than giving Davey Arnaud his first shot at being a full-time head coach.
Yeah, I agree. And it would seem very unambitious, right? And
Yes.
luckily, I don't think that's even in consideration right now. Davey said in the post-game press conference, like, as far as I know, I'm here until I'm not. And so I'm going to act like I'm here for the rest of the season. And that's how we're going to kind of treat everything else. I imagine if he were being honest or if he's talking to his family at home, like we should probably start looking for jobs in July or August.
Somewhere. Yeah. Yeah. And I think he's probably really truthful in saying, like, I wish the break wasn't right now. We would keep playing because I feel like he would love to have had like a different result and maybe a string of different results to prove his case. And now he can't even do that. So it's not a situation where God steps up to be an interim, wins a whole bunch of games in a row and sort of forces his way into the conversation. Like he doesn't have the ability to do that now because we're at the break. I want to go to the timing because I just saw some discussion online about like, was this somehow like a snap decision from Nathan Precourt because the last week had gone so bad and people had booed and he's reactive, or is this something that was that might have been in play for longer than that? Maybe all the way back to, I think Moises speculated like since maybe the Open Cup loss to Louisville, this is something in play. Like, how do you feel about that part?
I would say it's very likely at least something they were thinking about, if not actively planning for after that Open Cup loss, right? Like that's kind of when we turned and saying like, all right, Roto better start getting his Rolodex out and start making some calls because like this is clearly not working. Even though we know a lot of these players are quite talented, like it's not a perfect team, but they're playing worse than what this group of players talent level should be playing at. I think if we were thinking about it, they were thinking about it, and there's a very good chance they already had this stuff in the works. The fact that they already had that consulting firm named and hired at that moment, I'm sure it doesn't take a long time to get that over the line. I'm sure those consulting firms are just waiting for people to call them to do that kind of thing. But I think there's a really good chance that that call happened not last week, but maybe several weeks ago.
Yeah, and also I feel like most of the names that people have talked about are as available now as they were before, for the most part. Right? Like
yeah.
the people who are really appealing to us and to most people, like Garth Lagerwey, for example, and Wilfred Nancy, for example, were available then too. So it's time to start making those contacts. And then I saw this.
It's also just as slow of a trigger as the ownership group has had with other things in the past. It would be a real change of pace for them to just like say like, oh, we're going to keep these guys for the rest of the year, and then wake up the day after one loss and then completely change their mind and go a different direction. Like that feels unlikely.
Yeah, totally true. Totally true. And then I also saw this speculation online about like the ownership should take their time. They should make the right hire and they shouldn't rush. Maybe the person who's the best person for the job is not going to be available during the summer, and maybe it takes until 2027. And I don't think that that's true. One, because I don't think it should take that long to conduct this kind of search. And two, because in the press release itself, when they announced the hires, they very much were clear that this 60-day break, I don't remember the exact words, but basically allowed them to make these hires and get like their house in order before launching back out into the second half of the 2026 season.
Yeah, that's the way I read that press release for sure. It was very much framed in a way that like we're getting this done this summer. I could see we were talking about kind of the the hierarchy or like the echelons of our wish list on these things, I could see them saying like, okay, we called Lagerwey. He's not going to take any job. We called Curtin. He's not going to take a job. We called Nancy. He's staying in Europe. That will be then the test of like the ambition, where we've looked at the other MLS options that are available. That's not good enough, or that's good enough. Like, I think that will be telling, right? Of, okay, we didn't get the tops of our wish list, so we're just gonna get somebody in now so we can start making moves now. Or they could say, we're going for the best of the best and we're going to wait until that's available. Is that more available in the winter though? Like, I don't know.
And if you're going to do something like, if you're going to maybe go to Europe and take somebody else there, that's also available during the summer. So it feels like this international break provides everybody a chance to have a reset effectively all around the world. And that's why you see so many coaching and sporting director announcements being made right now, is because everybody's kind of using this window to uniquely look at what's available front office wise to make these choices. So I'd be surprised if it takes past 60 days or like 30 to 45, so you have a chance to do a little bit of work before the season starts up again.
I think it realistically happen in a couple of weeks if everything goes exactly the way they want and hope that it does. But that's not a given, right? Like, anything could happen. Just like I was saying before, your wish list might not be interested, might not be available, and it might take more time. But I'm hoping that's what this consulting firm is doing for them, is creating these short lists, reaching out, doing some investigation, and kind of saying like, let's look at these options in MLS, look at these options outside of MLS. And given that like the World Cup break coming on, the end of pretty much every season in the world happening right now, that there is that time to do it, and in a way that like a useful time, where it's like during the season, the time is hard to come by for these types of people, but everyone's on a break right now. So this is a good time to do it. And that gives me hope that it can and might get done pretty quickly.
Well, all right, let's go ahead and take a break. We're going to talk, like you said earlier, and this, like, we texted about after the match. Like, we don't need to talk about this match in great detail because it was awful and it doesn't mean a lot. And we can talk about maybe what it means. And then the other thing we'll get into after we talk about the match is kind of what the summer might look like for the new sporting director and coach, and like what flexibility we have and what fans should expect in terms of the rest of the season and who we have on the roster and who we might be able to gain.
Yeah, very much looking forward to digging into that. So let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FEF Law.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment that you can check out wherever you get your podcasts.
You can go to FEF.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FEF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders or parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community.
Amplify has been the home of fee-free banking since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees or minimum balance. That means Amplify's fee-free checking accounts help you get more mileage from your everyday spending.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more and to register for free parking at the Esperanza branch on game day, visit goamplify.com/moontower. All right, we want to move on fairly quickly to talking about the MLSPA salary drop and kind of what flexibility and what options the new sporting director might have this summer. But first, let's talk a little bit about this St. Louis game. Last game of the season before this World Cup break. We're kind of hoping for a little bit of a boost going into this break. The coach and sporting director get fired. Will that bring a new energy, a new kind of hope for these players? Will we get a new coach bounce? Will we get new tactics from Davy Arnaud where he does some things differently? Will we get players playing in different positions? kind of got none of the above. There was some like minor shifts to the attacking shape where it was like a 4-3-3 kind of look, but maybe a little bit lopsided at times where Dessler was pushing up a little bit higher and Gallagher was staying a little bit deeper, and your Facu and Nelson were kind of tucking inside a little bit, where there's some tweaks, but not a ton of difference there. Austin had some decent control for the first, 15, 20 minutes of the game, but no really good chances. And then it all kind of changed after a certain point, and it was all St. Louis after that point. St. Louis is probably fortunate to have gotten 3 the way that 2 of those went in, where one of them is just kind of an unfortunate own goal as Beers running back at the goal. The second one is a set piece where the ball falls to a guy, he gets a shot off, deflects off of one of our players, and that's how it beats Stuver through a crowd of players kind of blocking the goal. And then the third one was where our players were just kind of done, not really trying that hard anymore. But I think their XG was like just barely over 1. That said, this was a well-earned and well-deserved win for St. Louis, and a well-earned and well-deserved loss for Austin FC.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, one of the things Austin was kind of a little bit in trouble from the start was just the injury report, right? So like, if you don't have Uzuni as an option, and you don't have Heinzike back, we know the back line look as bad without him. I mean, it's like you're kind of limited in what you're able to do with his club, given the state of everybody. It's like in recovery, you can't play a ton and things like that. So wasn't that surprising that Austin didn't look great, but also St. Louis is shown to be pretty bad. So like, you should be able to do more against that club. And then you talked about the first goal being a header own goal from Gimme Biru, which we didn't get to see a replay of because Apple TV just wasn't working. I don't know how much more we're making, but like you can't show replays and you can't show stats and like okay, so this is a Fox game, right? So we can't blame it on Apple.
I mean, we can blame it on whoever we want.
Okay.
I watched it on Apple TV.
Sport. I watched it on Apple TV too.
I'm blaming it on MLS and Apple TV because that's where I watched it.
Me too.
Yeah, for like the first 25 minutes, it's had like the little score bug thing, and it had the score and the names of the teams, but then below that it just said technical difficulties, and there were no replays. The sound was delayed a little bit, which we were watching at the watch party, and there were 2 TVs which were also not in sync with each other. And so I was just thinking like, oh, we're hearing the delayed sound from the TV, but on the rewatch, it's like, no, the sound is just bad. And it's like a full second behind the action on the field. And so I was listening to Soccer Wise earlier today, and Tom Bogert went on a rant about them shooting an entire game on iPhones, which was the Houston Galaxy game, where every camera in the stadium was an iPhone 17 Pro. And Bogert was going off about like, why are you doing this when most of your broadcasts are bad or don't work or there's something going wrong? Like, fix that stuff before you start trying to shoot games on an iPhone. And I think this was a pretty good example of it.
Of that, yeah.
But we can stop grousing about that and get into the like the whys of like, we're not going to dig into every detail of this game, but I think there's still some things to take away from it. Like, what parts of it matter going forward, and what parts of it do we think we can kind of leave behind?
Yeah. So I think let's start with why it does matter. And we touched on this. Like, it's still a bad loss to a bad team, which is one thing. I think the most important, just like, math thing is like Austin's losing contact with the playoff position by losing to bad teams 3 matches in a row. Austin now sits 14th in the West, and now 6 points off 9th, which is LA Galaxy, which is 20. I mean, so that gap is not insignificant, and Austin's going to have to play a lot better, and they have to play like they're going to be a top 4 or 5 team in the West for the rest of the season in order to continue to be able to make the playoffs. So that's the number one thing. It's just like, regardless of what's going on the field, like they're running out of time to improve, and they're not showing a lot of evidence that they are improving.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because you can say like, okay, the West has this pack that's all not very far away from each other. And that's true. Like, Austin could come back from the break, win 2 games, and we're saying like, oh, the table looks completely different. But if you look at who the teams are in that pack, San Diego is surging right now, and there's no reason to believe that they couldn't turn it around after the break. Same with St. Louis. They're kind of surging right now. And I think St. Louis has room to make some more moves this summer as well. And then you've got the Galaxy in 9th, Minnesota in 8th. And so there's like, it's not a cakewalk necessarily. It's not like, oh, well, we just get above these two poor teams ahead of us. Like, there might not be two poor teams ahead of us. Like, they might all be better than us and continue getting better from this point forward. So any points count, and we did not get any here.
Yeah, and I think the other big point on why it does matter is that you talked about that, like, the last goal is just kind of Austin was done. And we get this comment after the game from Davey Arnaud, which says, I'm going to challenge these guys. The effort has to be more. We get the one from Brandon Vasquez, who says, it's all we can do. We have to be more demanding of ourselves and know everybody's got to get on board. And if you're not on board, then we go on without you. So I don't know if it's the same set of guys, but both the coach and Brandon Vasquez like called out players about not being committed to making an effort, and especially when they get behind.
Yeah, I would be very curious to know, like, who are the names? And like,
right,
which of the players are the ones not sprinting because they were asked to do a bunch of high-level sprints earlier in the game and they just don't have it in them anymore? And which ones are the ones that's like, I just don't care anymore, so I'm not going to run. There's one player we'll talk about who I don't think came on in this game. Maybe he did for a bit. We'll talk about later that I think the answer is he doesn't care and isn't running for that reason. But for most of them, I don't know. I don't like throwing that accusation around. And I would like to believe that it's like, okay, yes, their spirits have been crushed, and that is understandable. But you'd like to believe like they want to just like try a little bit, and and if they're not running, it's for a reason.
Yeah, you would hope so, but I thought it was notable that both of those guys made this call out in the press conference. So let's talk about why. Now we spent several minutes being negative, which we try to avoid. Like, why doesn't it matter? Why shouldn't we worry so much about what happened in this game specifically, and what do we have to look forward to maybe going forward after the break where we think things can get better?
Yeah, given the context of everything where coach, sporting director get fired, everyone knows that big changes are likely coming, that the real work that's going to fix this season doesn't happen now. It happens in, I guess they have 3 weeks off. And so it's going to be like, that work's going to happen in June and July. I can understand how there's like this senioritis effect of like, why, like this game doesn't matter. So I have a hard time I can see a player having a hard time getting focused or like getting invested in a game right now in the context of everything. I don't know if that's an excuse, but I understand it. So like, I think, do we call that solace? Do we take comfort there? I don't know if that's true, but it's like the alternative is this team is really, really bad, or they don't care enough to try in a game.
Or both are really bad and they don't care. So let's not go with that one. I think the next thing is just like Brandon Vasquez and Owen Wolf getting some minutes before the break, and probably not as many as we all hoped. I think for Owen, not as many we expected him to get going into the season, and he hasn't looked amazing in the time that he's had, but it's also been a very limited amount of time back.
Yeah, he got 80 in this game, which is great to see. Brandon he came in the 60th minute, so 30 some odd minutes. And Brandon was a player who spoke in the post-game press conference, and he was saying one thing about having a break and then kind of went back on it, where he was like, personally, I don't want a break because I'm just now starting to play. I would like to be able to keep playing games and get some momentum and get back into form and just like show people what I can do and show myself what I can do. And now I have to wait 2 months to play another game. But then he kind of backtracked and was like, okay, like maybe I was speaking for myself, but for the team, yes, this break is probably good. But it is a shame for Brandon and Owen, like coming back from this injury, and Danny Pereira to a degree as well, where it's like these guys haven't been able to get on the field together all that often, and they're just now starting to, okay, now we're going to shut down for 3 weeks and then come back and have preseason again.
Yeah, I think the other thing that is positive is that you get some other guys back. So Brendan Hines, gets healthy. You hope Robert Taylor can get healthy for as long as Robert Taylor can stay healthy. Hopefully Uzuni's back with a full load. Hopefully you get Jaden Nelson, who's been up and down, back. And like that's 4 guys who should be part of your match day 20 every week and can make a difference. So that's a positive thing, is that you get those guys healthy and get them back. And then I think a thing related to that is like if they're all healthy, when they come back from this break, they'll actually be able to like train together and practice together and make these connections that didn't happen during the offseason because of especially where Brandon and Owen were. So like that's another reason to think that maybe this team, along with the new coach that we are expecting to be hired, will be able to like create a chemistry that we haven't seen from this club so far.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, also the break here gives us a chance, like if there are new players, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, it will give them time to get settled in as well.
Well, let's go ahead and take another quick break, and then I think we can get into that. We'll talk about a little bit of Austin FC news, but then talk about this salary dump and where we may think the players are coming from and how this team might look different going into the second half of the season.
All right, hang tight. We'll be right back.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. Are you going through a lot of changes? Things going on in your life with your house? Maybe you wish were a little different. You're looking to reset. Maybe find a new place. Find a different environment, a different neighborhood for your kids. Don't get cut offside this market. Talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty.
The right strategy can turn today's opportunity into your winning goal. And Sage Wilson is the Garth Lagerway, the Wilfred Nancy of real estate advice here in Austin, Texas. Contact our friends at Sage Wilson Realty at sagewilson.com. All right, we are back. We're going to dig into kind of the meat of the show here, where we're talking about the MLS Players Association salary release. It came out like a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and given everything that's been going on since that point, we haven't really had time to dedicate to this kind of information, which is usually kind of headline news depending on the week it comes out. It happened to come out during a very hectic time, but we have time now. And I think it gives interesting context to the follow-up conversation, which is once we hire a new sporting director, what flexibility do they have? Who are the players we could see moving on? Who are the players we think are maybe very difficult to move, but maybe we want to move on? So these salaries kind of play into that for obvious reasons. So let's jump straight in and go to kind of the most notable salaries here. I think one point is that Facu Torres is now the highest paid player, which I don't know that I was necessarily expecting that. Were you?
No, and I mean, it's a pretty big number, right? It's $4.4 million, which I think is, outside of Sebastian Driussi, is going to be the most anybody's ever been paid in an Austin uniform. He's probably also the most accomplished. Well, I don't know. Brandon Vasquez is pretty accomplished too, but he's like top 3 for sure for this club. And I think this going back to, I think I mentioned about why this is an appealing job, like the fact that after spending $37 million last season, bringing in players, and it not working out offensively in the attack and it not working out offensively, the fact that they were willing to make the commitment to Torres and then pay him what they're paying him shows that this is not an ownership group without ambition on the field. It's just one that has lacked direction.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one point I think we should make before we dig into more of these is if you look at the MLSPA's document that they put out that has all of the numbers, and I think you should, if like you're interested in this kind of thing, it's a great resource. But there's 2 numbers. There's base salary and then guaranteed salary. And so the base salary is going to be like what's on the contract, essentially, like the base number of what they're supposed to get paid every year. The guaranteed is going to include signing bonuses, other kinds of bonuses, other little things that they're getting here and there. That is often the number that gets put toward the salary budget, if not a higher number for other bonuses and fees and whatever else they get added onto that. So that is the number we're going to use, is this guaranteed number, because it is always higher than the base one and often closer to the one that actually matters in these conversations as far as like how much of this salary budget are they taking up. I think the other ones were Danny Pereira and Owen Wolf. They both got contract extensions this offseason. Danny Pereira is at $790K guaranteed. Owen Wolf at $750K guaranteed. But Owen Wolf being on a U22 deal now only $200K counts against the cap. So that's kind of the benefits of this U22 deal. Danny Pereira is a TAM player. Why he's a TAM player, I'm not entirely sure, because TAM players, if you read the rules on the MLS website, it essentially says their salary budget hit needs to be above the what is the terminology here? The max budget charge, which is like the DP threshold essentially, which this season is $800K. $790K is less than $800K, which makes me think maybe there's some bonus, some kind of thing that's built into this deal where he is receiving above that $800K mark, and that is how they were able to justify using TAM on his deal here. Don't know. Maybe we'll find out eventually, but we do know he is officially counting as a TAM player.
And I think we're going to talk about the next, just like going down the salary list before you just talk about players who are interesting. The next two are Basard Savovich and Robert Taylor. So maybe not the most productive people that you want to be your, like 7th and 8th highest players, or 6th and 7th highest paid players, but we can save that for maybe the options that we might have during the summer.
Yeah. One of the other ones that I was kind of interested in is Joseph Rosales, who's also a TAM player, but his guaranteed salary is only $530K, which is also much lower than that DP threshold, right? The reason he can be a TAM player is because we paid it was a cash trade, right? Not GAM.
Right, it was
for him.
It was cash for.
Yeah, so if you do this cash trade on him, you can amortize that fee into the salary budget charge, which I think it was over $1 million or whatever, right? So that then, if you break that up between the length of the contract, that does put him over that threshold, and that's how they could use a TAM spot on Joseph Rosales. We already kind of knew this one, but Christian Ramirez listed at $577K guaranteed. The interesting thing for Ramirez is that we got him on waivers because the Galaxy messed up their roster build and needed to get rid of a player. And the deal that Roto cut, which I think this is one of the feathers in his cap here, is saying, like, we'll take Ramirez at the number that can get him to a supplemental roster spot. And so he is making $577K, if not more, this season. But the amount that Austin is paying is low enough to make him a supplemental roster spot. The Galaxy is paying the rest of it, which is awesome. That's really, really good. Brad Stuver, we knew he got a new deal, got a raise. It was a little lower than I thought it might be. He's $631K guaranteed, which puts him as the 15th highest paid goalkeeper in MLS.
So again, makes him the best deal for a goalkeeper in MLS, right? Like,
yeah,
his performance.
I'm split on it, right? Like, it's like, oh, cool. Like, we're not spending a ton of money on keeping this really good player around, but also I'm like, Brad deserves more money than that.
Right. It's just one of those weird things that, like, it's how much the sort of this pedigree and how much, like, your early success or what people think about you early on, like, makes a difference throughout his whole career. Like, if he had been, a more heralded prospect out of some European country at 19 and he had started higher, he would be making way more than that now. But it's just, he's like always going to be behind, for his whole career on that.
Yeah, this is one of the things, and this isn't just a soccer thing. Like, this is a business thing in any job you have where I think is unfair, and I don't understand why it happens this way, but your previous salary kind of sets a bar for how much you can negotiate for your next salary, which in a job like Brad Stuver's, it's not like, I don't know, in my job, like, how do you quantify?
Like, right. You wrote some really good emails, Landon or Jeremiah, right? Like, Brad's got it. Yeah.
But Brad is, like, clearly a top 5 goalkeeper, if not higher, in the league. And if you look at the names who are making more than him, there's, like, you see the reasons for some of them where they're, like, big European names. They're national team players for the U.S. or for elsewhere. I think Patrick Schulte got a really big deal where he was, like, about to move and they re-signed him and he got a big deal out of that. So there's reasons for it, and I understand why those reasons exist, but it is still, I don't know, it feels unjust a little bit.
I mean, at least he's, like, one of the guys who probably appreciates the fact that he makes that much money playing soccer and it's not going to affect what he brings to the field every week.
That means he's a guy who deserves more anyway.
Oh, I agree. Man, we're going to overthrow capitalism in the third segment of the show. It's going to be great.
Where do we leave off here? Okay, there's another little section I have here called Positive Surprises, which is Ilie Sanchez and John Bell are both on $225K. That means it's a low enough threshold, like a low enough line where you could theoretically, potentially buy them down to a supplemental roster spot. The thing is, I don't think we have any more supplemental roster spots. There's one set that is reserved for like senior players who make above a certain amount, who are above a certain age. And the ones that we seem to have open are for younger players on lower salaries. And so, although their salaries in a vacuum make it theoretically possible to move them down, I don't know that we could actually do it right now without moving some other pieces or clearing some spots elsewhere.
Yeah, that's true without applying that. Well, I think there's a couple other names, just not that their salaries are like super efficient, but the amount of minutes that we get or the contributions we get from John Gallagher and Brendan Heinzike for like where they lie overall, I think is pretty impressive. And like Austin honestly needs more of those guys and less of the Sabovich and Taylor guys, right? The people are overperforming a little bit of what they're getting paid. So it was good to get that kind of production from them.
Yeah,
and then
Heinzike and Kolmanich make the exact same amount of money, which
yeah.
I don't even know that Kolmanich is like that overpaid necessarily. I think it just shows that like Heinzike's output has been much higher than what you would expect from a player on that salary.
Yes. And then I always love like who's at the bottom. So Riley Thomas is making $88,025.
The lowest amount you can pay a player.
Yeah, and probably fair. I hope we see more from Riley Thomas at some point.
Let's move on to what kind of flexibility a new sporting director might have during this summer window. Because of where we're at, our roster is more or less full, right? We're using all 20 of our senior roster spots right now. As far as we know, that's what we believe based on the releases from earlier in the season, and doesn't seem like much has changed now. Like in one form or another, we are using all 20 of those spots. That means if we're going to bring more players in over the summer, if this new sporting director, the new coach want to bring in players over the summer, somebody's got to move. And so let's start off with a few categories. And I think this first category I put here was the most needed move. And I put that as Besart Sabovich. And like, we just got to get rid of this guy. And I held on hope for probably a little bit too long, and longer than a lot of Austin FC fans. I am done with this man. And like, I don't like talking about players this way because I know that this information gets to some of them, and I don't want it to. Like, I don't think players should consume media about them. I think it's bad for them. I understand why they do and how it gets to them. I don't think they should. And that's why I don't like saying things just like outright negative about players. I don't want Sabovich on this team anymore.
I cannot argue with you there. And so I think what I see that a ton from a lot of people, and I don't think that's not surprising to anybody in the fan base. So why is this the most needed move and not the easiest move?
It's because he has a guaranteed contract through 2027. So that is the remainder of this year. Plus, now that we have this weird thing in 27, it would be the sprint season in the first half of the 27-28 season once the calendar switches. So it would free up a senior roster spot and an international roster spot, which he's occupying both of those. But because it is such a long time, the buyout would be pretty big. I think he's on $650K. You're paying him for a year and a half of that salary. Is there a market to sell him? Like, if there is, try to work that angle, but it makes it harder when you don't have a sporting director, right? Like, I'm sure, like, for certain things, there's enough business minds in the organization that you could negotiate a deal for this or for that, but there's not many people experienced in this kind of thing precisely who are on the job working right now. And it would be a shame to like leave some of this too late. So I don't know. I think that throws a wrench in it too, but If you can sell him, but if you can't, like, maybe you just have to eat it because I
Because
don't
he's
know.
got to go. Yeah. Yeah, because you're right. Because there's not like like when Claudio left, there's not like a Sean Rubio sitting around who's done a lot of buying and selling and understands how the cap works and things like that. Because the people that Roto brought in were not people with a lot of MLS experience or any.
Or even a coach, right? Like, I
Right.
guess,
Davies
like,
never done this. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like, you could at least say, like, he knows about soccer, and you could, like, get his input plus the business people involved or whatever. But it's not ideal to have um that void in this moment where there are some moves who, like, might be kind of urgent right now.
Well, let's go into what is probably the easiest move, at least in my terms, if you're going to make that if this is specifically talking about for the buyout. Robert Taylor, he's on $630K, only guaranteed through this season, so you only get it's a much less expensive buyout, and it's also a position. One, he hasn't been able to stay on the field. It's also a position where like we probably have some of the most cover, especially if this offseason incoming move that we think is going to happen. So that's my choice if we can't find some way to get rid of Sabovic. Well, actually, it's Sabovic no matter what because it's not my money. But like realistically, that's probably the easiest move.
Yeah, Taylor's a guy who I think could still be useful if he can get healthy and get back in the field, just like get reintegrated. I think he is still a useful player, but I don't think he's so useful that he couldn't be sacrificed if that was kind of the only move you could make. And yeah, since he's only guaranteed through the end of this year, you'd essentially be paying half of the season for him to not work for you, which is he's on 630K, so not great, but not terrible. Like, they have paid much larger buyouts over the last few seasons.
Right. And let's talk about next somebody we thought when Joseph Rosales come in was going to be out. That's Gimme Beater. So super talented. Also prone to the occasional mistake, without a doubt. But I love the way he plays. But it seems like he's a guy that there might be potential demand, which is something that we haven't seen a lot in the people we talked about so far.
Yeah, I think the price to quality ratio is good as well, where his salary, I think 350K is the guaranteed number. And so I could see there being demand in MLS or abroad, like selling him back to Brazil or somewhere else in South America. And because his salary is not super high, that it would make sense for him to sign a deal like that as well if the right move were available. So it wouldn't be like my first choice. Like, I am very entertained by this man. Like, I think in the right setup with the right support around him, he could be a really good MLS player. But given like our needs right now and given the cover we have for him, where we have Rosales, Kolmanich, Gallagher, there's cover there. Like, we wouldn't necessarily be like hurting if he moved on and we could recoup some money and maybe even some GAM to use elsewhere. Like, that would be really good. And so I think he's a pretty solid option for that. So the next two names on the list are ones I just mentioned as left back cover. And so we can maybe cover these as a group, but John Gallagher and Jean Kolmanich, I think there could also be potential for moving them. John Gallagher, as much guff as I give him at times, I don't want them to move him for cultural reasons. He is, by public accounts and other stuff I've heard, like one of the kind of pillars of the club from a cultural perspective. And so I would love for him to continue to be on the team, retire here, and just play less than he does now. That being said, at his price, and just people around the league know him. He was an all-star and was it 23, 24, whatever year that was. And so people, like, he has a reputation of being a Swiss Army knife. Throw him in wherever you want. You're going to get a hard shift from him every game. And he's not on a super big salary. I bet you could not even convince, I bet there's a lot of MLS teams who would love to have John Gallagher on your team and would probably pay a decent little price for it.
Yeah, I think you're right about him. And the next one you mentioned is John Kolmanich.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a market there. Like, if he came from a different country, you might say, like, okay, well, this country has some rich clubs who wouldn't mind throwing some money to bring back like a youth international to play in Slovenia. But I think he's probably taking a pay cut to go back to Slovenia. maybe not demand in other places for him, maybe not a ton of demand within MLS for him. And so maybe that would be more like a buyout, because I think, am I correct in saying that he just has the rest of this year guaranteed?
I think when he signed that last deal, that's right.
So it's like through 26 with an option for 27. So it wouldn't be a huge buyout for him either, if we decided to buy him out.
And then let's go on to the big name that a lot of people wanted us to get rid of or buy out in any way possible. And then he started scoring some goals and shows a lot of grit. And now I think people are probably wavering on that. But this is a player that we have at least seen reportedly has some interest and would probably create maybe the biggest flexibility this team could have to reshape itself going forward if this person goes out.
Yeah, Mirtu Uzuni is somehow, there seems to be interest after his 2025 MLS season. There was reports of a deal earlier this year that fell through at the last minute. This is from Trabzonspor in Turkey. And there was reports of it, and then Roto kind of hinted at it in a press conference. And then I think more recently, Uzuni pretty much confirmed it, saying like, yeah, there was a deal. I was open to it, and it fell through at the last minute, and so it didn't happen. There's new rumors suggesting that Trabzonspor might still be interested. And so we get this listed as questionable on Saturday. Maybe it's a real injury, which is not unlikely or uncommon, but what if it means like, oh, this is already in the works, and he's like saying, okay, this deal's in the works, let's just shut it down right now, and I'm going to go on vacation and maybe get prepared to go to my new team.
Which is very common when these kinds of things happen, that you only find out about them after the fact, though. So, yeah, this is interesting because it opens up a DSP spot, opens up an international spot. He is the third highest paid player on the team, so opens up some actual salary too. So this is one, if the right deal comes through, you can see that would be really helpful to this team in its roster construction.
I looked through I think this is a useful thing when seeing links between this club and this player. Like, how much is this team willing to pay for players? And they have quite a few transfers, like incoming transfers, between like $4 and $7 million. So they don't do it all the time. They don't do it every year, but they do it sometimes. I don't know if they only use it on Uzuni. Apparently they do, or how much that deal is actually going to be for. But like, what is there a number you wouldn't take right now?
Well, I don't know enough about like the incoming transfer versus outgoing transfer versus how much we have left to know if there's a number that's so low that Austin's hamstrung by the number. So like anything that leaves Austin in an okay space to remake its roster afterwards, I'm absolutely down for.
That's a good point. Yeah, as long as we're able to like use a full DP spot afterwards, then great, go for it.
As long as it's not whatever happened to Ake Loba in Nashville. As long as that doesn't happen, we're fine.
Yeah. This next category, I have a couple of moves that like would theoretically be good and beneficial from a flexibility standpoint, but probably aren't happening right now for one reason or another. Danny Pereira is one of them. Just signed a new deal, which doesn't mean it wouldn't move. That could be a club leverage kind of play as well for getting maximum value out of him. But I mean, he's also been here for a long time. Is a good player, and like I think could be an even better player with the right setup, with the right pieces around him. But this next player we're going to talk about, I think, is probably one of the reasons why it's hard to fit the pieces together to a certain degree. Not the only reason, but Owen Wolf, with him and Danny on the same team, complicates things where we don't have a true six. And so you can't really play the two of them in midfield together as like a double pivot. And then for the other players on the field, it's like, okay, how do you get those two on the field while also getting your other most talented attackers on the field? And as you move the pieces around, it's almost impossible to do it in a way that like makes any tactical sense. So moving one of these guys like would open up a lot of flexibility and maybe give this new sporting director a chance to build a roster that makes a little bit more sense with that money that is gained off of whatever transfer this is. I think because of like Danny's situation, maybe he's more likely to be moved. Owen, you probably want to maximize value on him. I would guess right now is not maximum value time for him coming off of that injury. It was probably rising for sure over the last season, but I imagine suitors were waiting to see what happened. Can he do it again? Can he keep growing? Can he repeat last season? And now he's barely played. And so I don't think those maximum value calls are coming in right now. So I don't think that's really going to be in the cards immediately. I could be wrong, but I would guess not.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I don't think anybody's buying on his potential, and it's not like he's on the World Cup team to be able to impress some people internationally during the summer or anything like that. So I don't think that you're able to make that move. So with, say, one or two of these guys are gone, where do you go to make your replacement? I'm just gonna you have a list written. You thought about this more than I have. So like, what do you want to make this team better? Although I guess a playmaking number 10 has been the answer for the entire history of this club, which has not happened yet, except for in 2022 when all the magic came together.
We talked about it so much last year. We talked about it so much this preseason, and we've continued talking about it since then. But like a playmaking 10 would make a ton of sense. It is still hard to fit with these pieces. And I think if you bring in a 10 who's like, this guy has to be on the field, I think it makes Facu Torres better. I think it makes Brandon Vasquez better. But having a 10, Danny Pereira, Owen Wolf, Jaden Nelson, Facu Torres, and Brandon Vasquez on the field all at the same time makes zero sense. There is no tactically sound way to do that. And so what it means is one of your best players is on the bench almost all of the time. There's rarely a moment where you could get those 5 or 6 guys on the field at the same time, which in a better team, a team with fewer deficiencies or fewer gaps to fill, that's a good problem to have. It is a bad roster build when your team has quite a few deficiencies and more holes to fill, and one of your best players on the bench because you can't figure out a way to get him on the field.
And filling your biggest hole at the same time. And that assumes that Uzuni's not on the team too. So maybe go back to your second choice here, who maybe makes it a little more reasonable given the current roster build.
Yeah, and this one is tricky because let's say Uzuni moves, and I would have a hard time justifying using it on this next position, which would be a killer defensive midfielder. Ilie has his pluses, but he also has his minuses, right? Where he can't really cover ground. He's not gonna be running all over the field winning balls. Duber can kind of do that part, but he can't progress the ball at all. If you could bring in someone on that level of like Andres Cubas, Seb Berhalter, Sverskov in San Diego, like these kinds of guys to come in, and Danny and Owen could play ahead of them, and then you could have Torres, Nelson, and Vasquez on that front line ahead of them. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Like that starts to make this roster make a lot more sense. It means less time for Ilie, less time for Duber. That's fine. Like in a really good team, those guys aren't getting a lot of minutes, so that's fine. I think that would make a lot of sense. I don't know that you can justify using a DP spot there. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe you can do both if you can move enough spots. But I think that position would make a lot of sense.
And if you do that, well, so are we assuming that Rosales goes to a not in the front three with the new sporting director? Any of these situations where you bring somebody else in?
And maybe it depends on what they want. Like how are they going to play? What kind of game model do they have? Like I think you could play Rosales in the midfield with certain pieces around him and it would be fine because he is super good and super flexible. But again, yeah, I don't know the answer. Talking about like moving a good player that then like addition by subtraction as far as like flexibility goes, like Biru would be one of those guys where it's like, okay, throw Rosales back there. We don't have to worry about shoehorning him in somewhere else because he's so good. Like play him where he plays, and then we have flexibility to use these other spots in different ways.
And then you've still always got John and John for cover for that.
Yeah.
This last one you listed, I think is interesting because Austin's been pretty tough on the back line this year, and when Brendan Heidzike is out, they look really bad. And I think number one is I don't think Djordjevic has developed in the way that people hoped he would, and then I think John Bell is kind of like John Bell, but a center back upgrade would make a lot of sense for Austin.
Yeah, and I don't think that would necessarily be the number one priority right now, but if you can maybe fill one of those other spots and have an extra move to make, center back wouldn't be a bad way to use it, in my opinion. Where, yeah, we just saw when it's Heidzike and Svatak, not a bad pairing, like pretty good in a lot of situations. As soon as you take one of them off, like it declines quickly. And Djordjevic could still get there, but I think John Bell is what John Bell is. Like, he's fine in a pinch and in short stints, and maybe more so at left back than at center back. But if we want to like truly move towards contender status, like we need a more viable backup there to plug in for injuries, plug in for rotation, plug in for fixture congestion, and not have as much of a drop off as we do right now.
All right, so we've kind of teased this, so we feel like we're maybe creating one or two spaces of flexibility, but it's entirely possible that we're already one over what we have available, and therefore one gets us to even and two gets us one open spot.
Right, because, and I almost did forget about this, but there's potentially already a signing made with this Polish winger that we discussed a few weeks back. We haven't gotten official word from MLS or the team or anything, but the reporting was not that there is interest. It was this deal's done. And because of this guy having just finished a contract, there's a very real possibility that that's the case, that Austin FC has already signed this guy, and whoever the sporting director and coach that come in are stuck with him whether they like it or not. So we give a shout out to Ari, who is an Austin FC fan who recently moved to Croatia, and she heard us and the North End boys struggling so hard with this Polish winger's name. Ari happens to be in her Croatian language class. She has a classmate who is from Poland, and so she asked this classmate to, and maybe I'll plug this audio in, but she got her to pronounce it, and Ari said that even this Polish woman was like, oh, wow, that is an aggressively Polish name. So I think we should like maybe not feel so bad about not being able to say it, but I think I have it now, thanks to Ari and Anya in Croatia, but it is
Przemysław Płacheta. Przemysław Płacheta.
Przemysław Płacheta, where the L's are like a W sound, and that CH is just like a hard H. So Przemysław Płacheta, you can go with shimmy, but like, do you think there's a chance that that's not still happening? Or are we like, this guy's coming whether or not the new sporting director likes it or not?
This is one where I wish I knew more about like how the league actually worked to have an answer. But I mean, from everything we've seen in reporting, like it seems like it's a done deal. And so I don't know how you back out of it unless you get some weird, I don't know, the league front office negates it because the sporting director's gone or whatever. But everything we had, to your point, indicated this is like a thing that's already occurred and it's just waiting for the right timing to be able to announce it. I don't think you can just get out of something in that way.
Yeah, I think the only way that would be possible is if the player also didn't want to come anymore.
True.
And say we hire a coach or a sporting director and he's like, oh, actually, the sporting director or the coach are like, this guy does not work for what we want to do. They tell the player and he's like, okay, I don't actually want to come anymore. I imagine they could do something to tear it up or whatever. But if the player wants to come, or if the player wanted to play hardball and say like, I have a contract, you're going to pay me either way, like you got to let him come. You can't get out of it without his cooperation in that.
Yeah, it could be like, who was the guy that like never played? Who we signed last year?
Nicky Boloko.
Oh, yes.
So it'd be a situation like that where like even after he got here, he was a free transfer, so we aren't wasting a transfer fee. If we did it before he actually came, it would be like not wasting time or money on getting a visa and flying him over here and moving him and everything, which I'm sure they did with Boloko.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I'd say
gonna be-
chances are that guy's still coming.
I
which
think
means
you're right.
we don't have a senior roster spot. We have to make maybe I'm guessing there was already a move in the works. But even if that's true, that's one in, one out. We're still at 20. The new sporting director still needs to make a move to be able to do any incoming business.
So the sporting director is not coming in with a ton of flexibility during the summer, which is maybe okay. Like get the right person in, give them some time to sort of see what's going on, understand the team, understand where the talent lies, let guys get healthy, see what your coach can do, and then start overhauling things in the winter. The hard part is that this is the exact same thing we said when Roto came in, and he's like, this is going to take 4 windows, and then everything's going to be different. And here we are 4 windows later, and at least results-wise, like nothing is different. So we're starting all over again. So that makes it hard as a fan to have that kind of patience that we should probably have that'll pay off in the long term.
Yeah. All right. Should we move on to international call-up news, Jeremiah, before we finish?
Yeah, there's just a few of these. I mean, I guess this makes sense now that we're into the World Cup season. I feel like in a lot of breaks, we've had talk about a lot of players going off for international duty. Most of those players played for teams that did not make it to the World Cup, so this list of players becomes more narrow. I guess the one potential we have for somebody to actually appear in the World Cup is that Jaden Nelson gets called into the Canada camp, which is 32 players for 26 spots. So he becomes the last hope for Austin representation, but it feels like maybe he's not on the inside of it given where he was before with the national team and then how he's just performed this year and how he hasn't been healthy all year long.
Yeah, like I don't know. Nico seemed to call him out a little bit in a press conference saying like, I don't think it was like overly aggressive, but it seemed to be saying Jaden's being too cautious. He needs we think he's fine. All the tests show that he's fine. We would love for him to be playing, but he's deciding not to. I understand it here where if the conversation is, Jaden, you're going to be in camp, so stay healthy. And then once you get to camp, if you prove yourself and show that you're one of the best 26 guys here, like one of the best 4 or 5 wingers that we have available, you're going to make the team. In that circumstance, then it's like, yeah, I could see the player saying like, I'm going to save myself for this camp and not risk anything. At the same time, he works for Austin FC and if he's not on the field playing, it's like lowering his stock with the national team as well. So it's a tough spot for the kid to be in, and it's not guaranteed. So he's going to need to impress. There's some stiff competition for him, and it's very possible, if not likely, that he is one of the 6 players that is cut and doesn't make this team. But he's going to get to go to camp and try to get a chance to prove himself.
And then the next guy, who I think is probably the person we thought was the most solid choice from Austin FC to make a national team, is Facundo Torres, who got news today, yesterday, whatever, I'm not sure when, that he would not be on the Uruguay team, although he's fairly regularly represented that club, and it was specifically for sporting reasons, and kind of acknowledged, like, yeah, I haven't had that great of a year. Like, I understand.
Yeah, and that's a shame. I mean, like, I think there's a conversation to be had about underperformance or whatever, but I think it's also the context of the team that he's playing in. It's not helping him shine, really.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. That makes it so unfortunate because the World Cup, there's so few opportunities for a player to do that in their career, and it feels like the dysfunction in Austin has really hurt him, and it's largely, at least in my mind, not through his own circumstances that he's not there. It's just because of like everything that's going on around him and what he's been able to do and what he's been asked to do. And then the other person who is going to be in the national team camp, but for a club that is not going to the World Cup, is Danny Pereira. Gets called to Venezuela for their friendlies against Turkey and Iraq. So it's good to see him getting more time. Although I don't know if that's a club that's going to play a lot of World Cups. So maybe that's just he's going to get a lot of friendlies throughout his career.
All right, I think that is everything, Jeremiah. Anything else from you?
No, let's wrap it up.
All right. We'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Come find us on Instagram and sign up for the Patreon. We are trying to finalize details on these designs, but maybe in the next few weeks we can start putting out visuals and stuff like that. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back next week with any updates on the coaching and sporting director search, and maybe talk a bit about our plans during the World Cup, and then maybe listener questions, maybe an interview. We're kind of fluid at this point, but we'll have something good planned for you. So be sure to tune in. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
No one is around.
Think for nothing, you never.
La gente.
Oh my God.
Zula Chupa Boom Sauce.
Yeah.